What we're looking at this evening is all around exploring your startup idea. Now, we're not going to go into your specific one, but it's asking those questions you need to ask as you're exploring that idea you're looking to work on. And that means that we need to understand what your idea is and how we will explore that, the kind of questions we'll ask. How to know who your customer is, another very important question. Researching the market to see if people out there already want you, testing that idea, seeing if it's worth it, and then moving on to the next stage. So, how do we do all that? Well, let's get it underway and show you how. First, by starting to understand what the idea is that you're trying to work with. And that means getting a clear definition of what your business concept is. I can hear tons of people all around me all the time always saying they've got a great idea and they tell you that idea and it's very vague. It's not actually an idea. What it is, it's the beginnings of an idea. And that's great. That's a really good place to start from. But what we need is a clear definition of what that business concept is. If it's something which can be defined easily because it's something that's been done before, even better. We are a chiropractic practice that serves women in their 40s to achieve this. And that's what you really need to do. That concept needs to be something that can be easily explained, which also then has to identify the problem that you're solving. When I say the problem we're solving, I'm talking about, yeah, is there a clear, demonstrable problem you solve? And when I'm talking about problems, I'm not talking about very individual people's problems. I'm talking about problems that enough people have that will drive you to produce a business or a product in that business that can solve that problem. So an example could be that there are not enough people who are working to culturally appropriately produce employment outcomes for Indigenous people. So what you would do then is go, well, then what I need to do is to produce something that does that. Is that a problem that you've seen happening? Where you see enough people in your particular community who are not being served by traditional recruitment agencies? Or if it's something else completely different, it could be that you're producing a piece of software that solves a problem that people clearly have now. If there is no clear problem that you've seen that's out there in the marketplace, yet you're producing a solution to it, it's the biggest mistake in startup land that you can make. And that's the mistake of producing a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. I've done it myself before and lost well over $100,000 in the process. So I don't want to repeat that again. So whenever I do start something new, I do the market research to make sure that it actually is there. And part of that is also getting some kind of grasp that you need to be able to easily explain your solution in very simple terms. If a 10-year-old couldn't understand it, then it's probably too complicated. So what we need you to do is to get that down into something like what we call an elevator pitch. Now, we don't need to be thinking that Steve Jobs is in a lift with us. Actually, he's passed away, so that'd be very creepy if he was in an elevator with us. But let's just say Elon Musk, for the sake of an illustration, he's in an elevator with you. You're on your own, and you've got 30 seconds to pitch your idea to him. So how would you do that in the most simple terms possible? And by simple terms, I'm thinking, this is who I represent. This is the idea I have, and it's for these people. So that's you understanding who it's for, the customer, how it helps them, and a little bit about the not detail, but the simplistic way that your business solves that. So, for instance, if it is a bank that is specifically located in rural areas where people can't get to the major banks, then explain it that way. You say, hey, you know how there's no branches in small rural communities anymore when it comes to banking? They have to go either through post offices or deal with online. Well, I solve that by putting ownership of local banks in the hands of local people so that they can always access their money, always access the services, and they've got someone who can talk to them in the language that they understand. Great. That's your solution in very simple terms. You don't have to explain how you're going to fund it. You don't have to explain all the ins and outs of how the banking system works. All you have to do is have a very clear picture of what your business does. Now, if you don't have that, that's something you need to do first. Really get that captured. Next, we want to know about who your customer is. And if you don't know who your customer is, well, that's probably where you need to start right now, because That's who's going to make this work for you. That's who's going to pay for it. In the Northern Territory, where I'm from, we tend to have a situation where we rely very heavily on government grants for everything. And so there's a lot of business models being built around government grants and handouts and never around actual business principles of making a profit and having ongoing cash flow. No, it's always been about what grant can I get? What grant can I get? What tender can I get from the government? And we wonder when the economy is in a bit of a mess and things get pulled back, why suddenly our businesses are going broke. Your customer should be more than just the government, unless you really are building a customer. Because then if you are constantly getting money from the government to raise that business, then the government is your customer because they're the ones giving you money. Your customer isn't giving you money, the government is. So what we need to do is define who that target audience is. Who is the specific kind of people that you're looking for? Are they women over 40 who are empty nesters? Are they men who are under 25 who have behavioral issues? That's who your target audience is. Now, we're not trying to work out whether that target audience has money yet. Certainly will be helpful if they do, but we're just going, this is who we wish to serve. Now, how do we pay for that? Usually that target would need to pay for themselves. So a target audience would need to be somebody who is a target customer, not just an audience, unless you're creating a social enterprise, which is going to be funded through other ways. But in this case, let's just assume it's a standard business where you are making money from the people who you are serving. They are paying you for your time, paying you for your skills, paying you for your products, all that kind of stuff. So who is that? Who are they? And if you need to, pick out someone who's kind of like a personification of that. So think about someone you know who is the perfect example of who your customer would be. Put a picture of them in front of your desk if you need to. So you've got that picture in your mind all the time. That's who my customer is. That's who I'm always going to make sure that my marketing goes to them. That every decision I make around this business is about serving them the best way I possibly can. So they will give me money to run my business. That's defining a target audience. It also means understanding what that kind of person needs and what their pain points are. And pain points are the things that cause them stress and worry that they want to go away. So that could be services that you provide. It could be a product that you sell them, any of those kind of things. But it really does need to start from understanding not only who they are, but what are the things that they need fixed? What are the pain points? What are the problems? And how will you solve those? Then we consider how your idea actually benefits them, how it solves their problems. We can't just say, well, yes, I have a solution to those problems for this person. You've got to say what that solution is. How does it benefit them? And the benefit usually is a feeling, not necessarily an action. So the action could be, well, we organize their monthly payments and their expenditure so they don't have to stress about it. The benefit is so they don't have to stress about it. So you have all the things you do as somebody who's running that business and providing a service or providing a product. But the benefit is usually what the outcome is for them, that they feel relaxed, they feel cared for, they have this problem no longer a part of their life, so they live stress-free. Think about the emotional outcome that your product or service is going to create for them. Next, we have to research that market. And that can be hard because we think of market research as somebody walking around a shopping center with a clipboard and asking questions of people. That's actually a very old way of doing market research. And for some things, if it's maybe things in a supermarket that you're trying to buy, maybe that's a good thing to do. But there are many other ways to do it now. Your market research should always start at looking at who is already serving that person in the way that you're looking to serve them. Is there a competitor already out there? Who is already doing this? Is it a recruitment firm that does this already? Is it an individual consultant who does this? Is there a piece of software on an app that's doing this or a website that's already doing this? Who are they and how do they do it? Really get to know who they are because they already have access to your customer, right? So what you want to get is to find out how they got that customer, what it is they do that draws your customer in, because that will give you clues and a bit of a shortcut on how you can then do the same, but perhaps in a better way with better marketing and a better offer and offering better benefits for the customer than they ever possibly could. But you do need to look at them. I know there's a lot of motivational quotes around, oh, you make sure you're looking ahead and never looking behind. But the reality is your competitors are already out there. They're already acting in the marketplace. So they're actually ahead of you. So as you're running your race, you're looking at their back. Once they get behind you, you need to look behind you occasionally to see where they are. But really, what you're doing, it's making sure that you can see what those people are ahead doing, so you know how to not make the mistakes that they make, but also double down the things that they do well and perhaps do those even better. The other thing is to find the gap in the market. So once you've got all of these competitors, you're going to find something that they don't do so well. And that's where the gap is in the market. So I'll refer back to my Indigenous employment consultancy, like I did before, when I was talking about the idea that you might have a way of working more culturally appropriately with placing Indigenous people into jobs, maybe even for the first time, or in rural area, remote areas where they may not be a resident of. So what you need to do is go, well, who else is already doing that kind of work? And what are they doing really badly? You might go, well, they're not really doing this in the world of, they're doing it with mining, they're doing it with construction, but they're not really handling anything else. What about people who don't work physically? They want to work with their brains. Well, no, who's handling that? Well, we'll find that gap in the market, and we now know to build a product or service around that. So it just depends on what you're doing. So if you're doing something which is around that, or perhaps if you're working in a product. So we've seen a lot of products come up in the last few years in the form of software and apps that are fulfilling gaps in the market. An example at a very big scale will be something like Airbnb, right? Hotels had this thing where they were always charging, you charge for the room, then there's charging for the parking, then there's charging for the internet, and then there's charging for this and charging for that. There's always extra charges. Airbnb came in and said, well, these people are renting out space in their homes as well as whole homes and whole apartments, all inclusive. Now, there's been a certain what we call enshittification, which means that things start off really well in these kind of products and then get worse over time. And that is that's an actual word in the I think the Collins Dictionary, I think in the US, where it's an actual word of the year, I think in 2023, which was all to do with that phenomenon where things started off really well and they got worse and worse. We can do that with social media started great and then it became a mess. Online banking started great, now it's become a mess. Airbnb, Uber, they all started great and they all became a mess and they're not as good as they used to be. So what we do is look for, well, the next generation of those services and apps and online revolutionizing of some kind of thing that people have problem with will come from identifying the gaps. So the next Uber competitor will say, what does Uber do badly? Oh, they've become too expensive. Great, we've got to find a way to make that cheaper. What about Airbnb? They've become complicated and everybody's charging ridiculous rates. What do we got to do? We've got to find the things that are going to charge less, that bring the market back into Airbnb. We're identifying those gaps in the market, but we also then need to go, okay, there's a gap there. We see that gap. How big is the market for that? How many customers are there really? What's the demand for that? And this is where we have to take a long, soft look at ourselves and go, is this just an idea that I've come up with that I think is cool? Or is this an idea that really does, have some potential and have the ability for them to for you to be able to grow that out? Is there scale available in there that's not only going to pay for itself, but pay for you, pay for staff, pay for all the costs that are going to come into your business? That means looking, okay, we can't just work with 1 or 2 people a month. That won't be enough. We need to work with 30 or 40 people a month in order to make enough money to be able to pay ourselves, pay the bills, and make this a viable business. So that's often hard to do in the Northern Territory where I am. I'm actually in Queensland at the moment, but where I usually am is in the Northern Territory. And that because we don't have the power of numbers in the Northern Territory. We have some overblown numbers in certain segments, which we go, well, there's a really good opportunity over there. The NDIS, for instance, is a big example of that. The number of people as per capita with the population in the Northern Territory is overrepresented in disability services. So which means it's a very big opportunity for someone going into NDIS services in the territory, because there's not enough. No, I wouldn't say there's not enough. There's a lot of small players in there, but what they're doing is they're specializing in 1 or 2 things, but there's very few that are handling the whole care cycle. So there could be an opportunity there, and that market size and potential demand, well, there's doesn't seem to be a decrease in disabilities being presented for NDIS services in the Northern Territory. So there is unfortunately a growing problem there. Now what we're going to do is test that idea. We've got this idea, we've got our market sorted, we've got our customer segment sorted, we know who it is we're going to be selling to, we've got an idea of how many people there are. So we've got to test this out. We've got to see whether people actually want this. And that means creating some kind of, look, it can be a prototype, it could be a physical model if you're building and inventing something. It could be a mock-up of the software. You go into Canva or Figma or one of those tools, or even just a piece of paper and a pen and draw it out, right? Or you can, if you're setting up a service, sort of put down what that service will look and feel like and how it might appeal to people. And that all for the purpose of going to the people or someone who represents the kind of customer you're trying to work with and asking them and saying, am I crazy or is this a good idea? And now you want to be careful with it. You don't want to go to people who are potentially your competitors. What you do want to do, though, is go to people who would be representative of who would benefit from this particular service or product or invention. And that means having a chat with real people. You can't just do this in AI. You can't just run a simulation. You need to talk to real people to see where the problems might be, because as smart as you are and the big as your brain is, you're going to miss something, right? And this was done as recently as last year. There was a startup I was working with that was producing a piece of software using AI to really help out people with well, I won't go into exactly what it is because it tells you who that startup is, but it was a process that a lot of businesses in the Northern Territory need to do when they're dealing with government. And it's a really lengthy, very time consuming process. Now, what they wanted to do is make this much faster and easier. So what they did, they invented this thing, spent thousands of dollars building out the software for it, then went to a focus group of customers that I found to them, and then they tested it against them. They came back with a lot of feedback that said, yeah, this is not really helping us out. In fact, this is actually making it harder for us to work with rather than easier. That's a real slap in the face for that startup who basically had to go right back to the beginning, change their assumptions. Because what happened is they walked in with assumptions that this was something that people needed, when really it wasn't that they needed. It was something similar that they needed, but just not that specific thing. So that was something that they had to learn as a lesson. They wouldn't have known that. Thankfully, they didn't spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars building this system, because they would have been stuck with something that nobody wanted that helps to, like I said before, it solves a problem that nobody really has. So that was a really dodged a bullet sort of thing, but that's why you want to do that, to create something very early so you can get that feedback from potential customers, real feedback from them, from real people, not just case studies that you'll find on the internet, not just social media messages saying, hey, is this great? It's actually asking real people, because people, when they're really involved in that thing that you want to solve, they've got passion and they've got feelings around that. So they're going to give you some pretty solid and honest feedback whether this thing is actually going to work for them or not. And you've got to ask more than one person. You've got to ask several people, if possible, dozens of people, to be able to give you that feedback. So you can start to see the patterns that are emerging and what the variety of problems that may pop up are. Now, you may get through that process and you come out of it with 80% positive feedback. That's great, and you can move forward. But you do need to ask those questions, because when feedback comes back that says, this is not really what we need, we kind of need this, you're able to make those adjustments to your ideas based upon the feedback you're getting from those people. So you can twist that dial, push that up, change that color, maybe build the casing differently, or in the case of a service, maybe the web interface you're using needs to be much more self-serve, or it needs to be completely in person, because nobody wants to deal with an online person or a call center. So that you won't know that unless you ask people. Your assumptions may get you part of the way, but you need to talk to your customers to get that feedback, because then you can decide if it's worth going ahead with this thing. And that's where you need to ask yourself, do you have the skills and the resources and the guts and the determination to be able to see this thing through? And that's where a lot of people kind of get stuck. They're very used to maybe having a full-time job, specifically with government. If we're talking about the Northern Territory here, that's the biggest employer. And they're used to certain benefits that come with that, a predictability, money that's always coming in at the same time every fortnight or every month, in the same way. You know you're going to get a pay rise next year. You know you're going to get 6 weeks annual leave. And if you're going to take on this business, this startup, all that goes away. All that certainty goes away. All of that, the things that you know that you're entitled to, there are no entitlements when it comes to a startup. So it's not everyone is ready for that level of uncertainty or to absorb that level of risk. But some people are. They might have such a great idea that they really want to make that happen. So ask yourself, do you have the skills? Do you have the patience? Do you have the resources? Both in terms of money, in terms of time, in terms of people around you who can ask for help. Do those exist? And do you have a true understanding of how much this is going to cost? Because if you don't have that money up front, well, then we've got to have a look at what your funding needs are and where that money is going to come from. Do we have to go to investors? Do we have to go to government? Do we have to go to others, to mum and dad, to help give us the money we need to do that? And that's getting very honest about what it's going to cost. And that's going to take you asking questions. You might say, well, I'll need an office. That's going to be probably about the same as it cost me to rent my house, right? Well, there's then other things when it comes to office rental that's beyond just rental. You've also got outgoings, just like you do with a home, right? You don't pay your rent and you also get included the internet and the electricity. You have to pay for those separately. They are your outgoings. The same thing with rent. You have to pay for those outgoings. You may have body corporate fees that you need to pay into that you didn't make an allowance for. I remember the last place I rented in was an extra $300 a month on top of everything just to pay for someone to mow the lawn that nobody ever got to see because my place was, they never parked there. They were parking around the other side. I had no benefit from that because nobody came to that premises during the day. So you've got to get some understanding of what the true costs are. How much is it going to cost to air condition that place, which is one of the greatest costs in modern buildings anywhere in Australia these days is heating and cooling, right? And are you going to be paying excess water because you've got a kitchen there that's going to run taps all day long? Do you need to have really top level broadband internet and a satellite backup in case things go wrong because your business has to run around very, very strong internet requirements? How scalable is your idea? Is this something that's going to be one office or you working from the home office? Because that makes it incredibly uninvestable. Investors are only interested in things that can grow, that can scale way beyond what it is you're doing in just one home office. Most sole trader businesses are not what we consider any way scalable or in any way investable. You might think, oh, yes, it's going to have big results. I'm going to have to hire 3 or 4 people one day. And they're like, well, that's still not worth investing in. That's a business that's going to be lucky to make $1 million a year. Investors aren't really interested in that sort of small business. They want to see something that's much bigger, much broader, going to be a much bigger customer base that's going to scale out without the costs scaling out too much ahead of it. But do you know what that is? Because that means that you need to look at, well, is there growth in this business or is it just my lifestyle business? It was a lifestyle business. It's not really a startup. It's more of just a hobby that happens to pay its bills and employ you. And you can do it from your kitchen table at home. But a startup is something that's rapid, high growth, something that's going to be ultimately scalable, that you're never going to be able to bootstrap it yourself. At some point, you're going to need money from somewhere else. So moving on to the next stage, once you've kind of sorted out all that stuff, then we need to look at what you're going to do next. And that starts with a business plan. And a business plan is important. Now you can use tools like the business model canvas, which I think is an excellent tool for being able to work out what it is from, who's your customers, what's your product, who are the things, what are your resources you can get into, what's your cost basis, what's your revenue basis. All those things will make sense. I'll just say when it comes to a business model canvas, if you have to do one, start from the outside and work in. It's not always obvious how to do a business model canvas. It looks a little confusing. You start with the outside columns first, and then you move into the center, then you go down to the bottom. Okay, so hopefully that clears that up a bit. A business plan is something you can literally generate on ChatGPT these days. You just go in there and saying, I want to generate a business plan for this. But what you would probably do Do the business model canvas first because it's a nice graphical way to do it. Take a photo of it or scan it into your computer, load that into something like ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude or one of those other AI tools, even Google's Gemini, and then ask it to take all that information you've got in there and turn it into a business plan. And that will give you an idea of what that business plan is. Now, business plan, it's not set in stone. It's not something which you do once and it's always going to be unchanged. It's just the very beginning. It's what you're thinking of in terms of where I'm going to go with this business. How much can it make? Where can it go? What can it turn into? What's the future for it? Is it going to make money? Here's how we're going to make money. All those things lined up. So I would always go with a business model canvas, and I'll be doing a business model canvas workshop early in the new year in the same way that we've done this one tonight, to be able to give you some idea of how to work that into your plans for your business. You also need to seek mentorship and advice. And I can't downplay this at all because it is so important that you have friends who are also in business or somebody that you know who you can talk to at various stages in the time that you're trying to put this business together. Most of us don't grow up around business owners. Most of us grow up around other employees. Our parents were employees. We were employees. Our friends are all employees. We seem to surround ourselves with people who are like we are. But then suddenly you change from being an employee to wanting to be an entrepreneur or a business owner. Then you find that you're kind of a little out of step with the people in your life who are not going down that path. They may not understand you. They'll have, generally their advice would tend to be, oh yeah, you go girl, you do this thing. Or it'll be something more akin to, oh my God, what are you doing? This is going to be so dangerous. Are you sure you want to do this? It's so risky. When they don't even know what the risks are. They just know they wouldn't do it. So therefore they think you shouldn't do it. Now, everyone's going to be coming from such a place of love with that. Very few people are going to come from a bad place, but they're not coming from a useful place. They haven't seen it. They don't understand it. They've not been through it before. So that's where you need to seek mentorship and advice. And in the Northern Territory, we've got access to people like the Business Enterprise Centre, Darwin Innovation Hub, the Array, and the Northern Territory Indigenous Business Network, who can help form your network of advice and mentorship. Some of the services are free, but some of the services are available elsewhere. Now, preparing for the challenges is very much a mindset thing. Like I said, not everybody is prepared or in the right place to become a business owner, because there are risks involved that you may not be ready for. So preparing for challenges is doing things like getting your mind ready for that, understanding, listening to a lot of podcasts, getting onto YouTube and getting that feeling, getting some more information from people who've been there and done that, who've got that kind of mindset to work the way that you feel like you will need to as well. It means mentally hardening yourself, getting ready to understand that sometimes you're going to have to chase people for money. How do you feel about that? What is your feeling about money itself? Do you feel like money corrupts all things and makes them evil? That may not be a good place to start from when you're trying to start a business. So understanding, having a healthy respect for money and what it can do, how it can achieve the purposes you're looking to achieve, and then preparing your mental state for the reality that sometimes things are going to be hard. This is not always going to be an easy journey. The whole idea that we can grant ourselves and fund ourselves and somehow get funding that's going to make all roads calm for us, eventually something won't be funded by government or by government investment agencies or by Aboriginal investment agencies, but simply because it's never going to work. Eventually that tap gets turned off and you're on your own. So are you ready for that? Do you have money set aside for that? Are you able to literally run this thing for 1, maybe 2 years without making any money in order for you to be able to get it to the point where it's going to be standing on its own 2 feet? Some services will get going within 3 months and you'll have no problem with making money. Others, well, they're going to take a lot longer and you're going to have to really wait for it to start producing a profit or even a first customer. Some things take a lot of money and investment to get going. Are you ready to take that on? Is there a possibility that you may make no money for 2 years, so you need to rely on someone else in your family to help support you through that? So just make sure you're prepared for those challenges. Now, how the Darwin Innovation Hub helps is through various things, but we really do focus in on this Start NT program, which is our way of kind of guiding you through all these steps. what we do in the beginning is assist you with some initial funding through the Northern Territory Government's Business Innovation Program. It offers $30,000 that's split between an advisor, which is us, and a supplier that helps you to build that thing you're looking to build. Then we guide you through a couple of stages of development, which is then going through the working out all those pre-things and then starting the build of your prototype, if you like, getting yourself ready for that initial launch, whether that prototype is something physical, whether it's something that's in your brain, whether it's something that's in a technology that's going to be on a website or an app. We can help you to find the right people to help with that, but also to keep you motivated and on track for that development. And then we can also help you gain funding for commercialization, which is either through other grant bodies or through investors elsewhere. But we may also be able to assist you with potential investment through our parent company, Paspalis Innovation Investment Fund, which invests, millions of dollars in territory and beyond the territory innovations that have some kind of benefit to the Northern Territory, or at least to Northern Australia. So there's an ability for you to get involved in that. What I suggest you do is to find out more about StartNT as you hop onto our website, darwininnovationhub.com.au, where you'll see the information about the StartNT program, and also can reach out to me as well. Probably the easiest way to reach out to me is probably through my LinkedIn presence. So if you want to reach out to my name, it's there. I'm the only one on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me, connect through to me, send me a message, and I'll be happy to have a chat with you at some stage during the next week to see if there's some way we can assess your idea to see if it's something worth following. I'll just see if there's some other options for you. It may not be us, it may be others, but we'd like to at least, maybe introduce you to those others so you can get started on the right track.